Pew.
Pew 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 pew. And awesome. We are live. Welcome everybody to the other side of the die where we discuss how you can have less drama and more fun at your gaming table, regardless of what tabletop role playing game that you are playing. My name is Paul Postal, and this is my cohort.
Jeremy Kimberlin.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Good to see you.
You too.
And I want to let you guys know that you can reach us on Twitter at Other Side Die. We left out two words in the title. It's not at the other side of the die, it's at Other Side Die. Or if you're old school, you can send us an email if you like at othersidedie@gmail.com. We do stream every other Sunday, started at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Eastern US time, and Jeremy and I will just keep going until we run out of things to talk about. So, Jeremy, what are we going to be talking about this evening?
Yeah, so this tonight's stream we're going to be talking about how to bring stuff to your GM. And this is going to go over a whole host of ideas of stuff that you could bring to your GM. Just a few things that we're going to bring up is character building, which would go into race, backstory, home brewing, character development. That could include downtime and NPCs and stuff like that. And then the whole problem of any kind of issues that you're having within the game or maybe even outside of the game.
Yeah, and then I think we're also going to wrap up. You've got some ideas about when players bring ideas to you to help world build if you're doing a homebrew campaign. And that's one of the things that Jeremy and I joke around a lot is Jeremy does a lot of homebrewing. I do not do a lot of homebrewing because I just don't have the imagination that Jeremy does. Jeremy, just in our notes and or our conversations, has told me he has created several campaigns, and personally, I prefer to run published campaigns and stuff that I find online. That is one thing that Jeremy and I have talked about, how he has his imagination to come up with all these ideas for different campaigns. Just amazes me, but I am certainly don't have that kind of imagination. So, Jeremy, let's talk first about character build. When players bring ideas to you for what kind of a character they want to build, and this is going to be mainly around D&D because that or Pathfinder. I think Jeremy, you're getting more into Pathfinder.
Yeah. Oh
All
my
right,
gosh. I'm loving that right now. Oh,
awesome.
yeah. Yeah, it's been a joy. Yeah, so character building, I think one of the biggest things and you got to talk about the races that are allowed. If you're a player and you show up at a table and you're this like, well, it's in the
Mm-hmm.
new book that just came out, you should
Mm-hmm.
probably run it by the DM. Because some of those races, like especially for me having a homebrew world and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that race might not be in my world.
Right.
Maybe I can carve out a chunk, but coming to the table right off the bat with kind of springboarding it on me is going to put me in a really bad spot. So always bring up the race that you're wanting to play to see if it's even playable.
Yep, absolutely. I think Jeremy, you bring up a very good point about it being, especially with homebrew worlds. You know, if you're playing in official Wizards of the Coast campaigns, you know, if you're playing D&D and you're playing in the Forgotten Realms, pretty much almost any race, unless your DM has some reason for not allowing it, most of the time, I would say, like if I'm running Curse of Strahd right now in kind of in the Forgotten Realms,
Yeah.
and I'd be open with almost any other race that any race that my players want to play. But to your point, Jeremy, if you're doing a homebrew campaign, like I have done homebrews,
Yeah.
and in one of my homebrews, I did not have any dark elves. And
Well,
go ahead.
even in the Forgotten Realms, you now have rabbit folk and fairies, which really aren't like in a lot of the Forgotten Realms stuff. So like you're now getting new books that have races that aren't seen in the Forgotten Realms and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, I whenever you especially character development, you always want to bring your race, and then this kind of goes straight into the next topic, which would be backstory. You always want to bring your backstory to the DM. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you know that you're going to be playing in a game in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the sooner you can get some of that backstory written down and given to your DM, the more that they can use it.
Okay, let's talk about backstory here because when you and I were prepping for this stream, you and I were kind of aligned a little bit on the whole backstory thing because I agree. Bring the backstory, um, to your DM ahead of time. But as I told you, if you bring a backstory to me and it's longer than a page, I'm not going to read it, and I'm probably
Yeah,
going to tell you to go back and rewrite it and condense it down. Because in my experience, when players bring to me a backstory that is longer than a page, what that usually means is that, and this especially appropriate for campaigns that start at level one, it usually means they've written a character who has done all these great things in their life before they're even
yeah,
first level. And I'm sorry, if you're playing a first level character, you should not be having a character who has done all these fantastic things. Like, for example, had a player in a homebrew campaign I played, playing a gnome rogue. And I can't remember if I told you this story when we were prepping for the stream. Did I
yep,
tell you this story?
yeah. I just saw a version of it on TikTok too.
Yeah, so a gnome rogue that spent 50 years in a library, was the deadliest assassin in all the land, knew everything, even though their history skill
At
was
level,
on at
yeah,
level
and they're
one.
level one.
Even
Yeah,
and especially even though their history skill was only like, I think it was like maybe a 13 or the modifier. I'm sorry, talking about the modifier. The modifier might have been like a +1 or a +2,
yeah,
but supposedly this gnome rogue has spent 50 years in a library and knew everything there ever was to know. That is a
yeah.
player who wants to win the game.
Yeah. Now, so for me, I have one of my players in particular. He'll come at me with like a 4, 5, 6 page document. And typically he gives it to me with enough time that I will go through. I'll get a lot of the big details out that I need. Uh, for me, and I try to tell my players this a lot of times, the more you give me in the backstory, the more I'm going to be able to write really interesting story points into the main story and have side missions that touch base on it. I don't demand it. I do think it makes it more fun, but I don't demand it. Becca in our chat is over here saying backstory terrifies me. Yeah, I when she played with me, it was like, yeah, you're traveling and that's why you're here, and that was the backstory is you're traveling and that's why you're here.
So, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention this as well. So, I'm very interested to find out from Becca why does backstory terrify you? If you don't mind putting it in the chat, just kind of unpack that a little bit. I'm curious to know why backstory terrifies her.
We'll touch on that after you type that
Yeah,
one out. Uh,
yeah. She might have to write a
yeah,
backstory on why backstory terrifies
yeah.
her.
Give us the backstory for why you're afraid of a backstory.
Right.
Uh, but I have one of my guys who's been a regular at my table for years now, and one of the most common character develop like his backstory is almost always amnesia or something like that. And so it's been hard for me to make it interesting every time. I think I've done a good job sometimes, but other times
Yep.
but he's gotten a little bit better. He'll give me kind of like a paragraph now, which is better than I have amnesia. I know nothing. So improvement.
Have you ever used with your players, Jeremy? Have you ever used any kind of structured approach to backstory, like tables to roll on? Like Xanathar's Guide to Everything has tables
Uh
in there to help players with their backstory, or
so
do you give them some
yeah.
kind of a questionnaire for them to answer?
I've used those. I've not used them. Sometimes, a lot of times at session zero, or if I can get one-on-ones, I may go through questions. Some of the questions that I like to ask is, what is your favorite, like, what was your favorite place to go to while you were in your hometown? Like, what's an interesting thing that you went and did? Did you like going to the yearly tournaments, or did you like a specific tavern in your town? To make it feel slightly more realistic when you have a couple details from your
Mm-hmm.
homeland that you could share with somebody quickly. Uh, I think stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that really helps the backstory a lot more than I train hard, I have high strength. I mean, that's interesting and it explains why you have a high strength, but I like to get into a bit more of the personality of
Right.
behind the person.
Well, and I think that's a really good point there to bring up, like what kind of festivals were in your town, or
Mhm.
what is your character's favorite food or drink or something like that. Because if you have players who are really good at role playing, then they can bring those in conversations with other players. So I'm looking here at Becca's comment here. Not confident on storytelling with a lot of excellent play with a lot of excellent storytellers and world builders. Always feel like mine fails. Oh, I have a very hard time believing that, Becca. All right. This childhood was pretty boring, and so I had to get out and be not boring.
Yeah,
That's funny.
and I
That's funny.
totally understand. So she was kind of bringing up the point that it's I don't want to put forth the effort because I feel like mine will fall short of the standard. Uh
Hmm.
yeah, and so
Um,
she just brought up the
yeah.
tragedy, shying away from tragedy in a backstory.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Tragedy in a
Yeah.
backstory is meh.
It's been done to death.
Yeah.
I mean, and I agree.
I as
Yeah.
a DM, I think it's more interesting if you come to my table and you're like, look at all my happy relationships I have, right? Like that's more interesting. One, because I can play with those happy relationships,
Yep.
and two, I don't hear about the tragedies that every other PC has ever told me.
Right, and what are you supposed to do with a player who says their character's backstory is orcs raided my family's farm and wiped out our village, and everybody I ever knew is now dead?
Yeah. Well, okay.
What are you supposed to do with that? So yeah, I'm with you. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, when you're bringing it to your DM, give them time to read it and approve it. And some of our notes in here, I think you and I both agreed. Don't get mad if we don't
Yeah.
approve your backstory, because if we're asking you to make changes to it, especially if you're doing a homebrew, it's probably because we need you to change it to fit the homebrew world.
Yeah, and this is going into you want an item or class things or a race that's homebrew. Definitely give the time for a DM to read through it and figure out if it is balanced or not, or
Yep.
balanced enough for their own game. I would suggest if you're a newer player to stay away from homebrew quite a bit more, as you're not
Mm-hmm.
accustomed to balancing things quite as much. For myself, something that I have started to do to some of my players, because I have one player in particular that will just try to bring me the most ridiculous like items that he can find. And so what I've started to do is
Mm-hmm.
I will make him fight an enemy that just has that specific thing, like a regular character with this item versus your current character. And if you can kill them with that item, then sure, you can have the item because it's not broken. If you get absolutely demolished because of that item, probably a bit too strong, and let's not put it in the game.
Interesting. So you actually will have that player
I
play.
I
Well,
will,
wait,
yeah.
I have a question. Do you let them use that item and fight against an opponent with the same item? Do a mock
I
battle
haven't
that
done
way?
that. No, no, because
Okay.
I would rather show them why the so if I give it to them and I give it to the enemy, then they get to use the powerful stuff from it. I think it's a lot more uh of a lesson when they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the item and they get to see
Okay.
what it does to the
I,
to an encounter.
I was misunderstanding you. I was thinking you were saying
Yeah.
that outside of the game, you do a mock battle with that player and let them try the item out and see. But you're talking about this is something you do in the game.
So no, I will
Okay.
typically, yeah. So what I've done in the past is basically like my player gives me is like, I want this item. And I'm like, all right, well, hey, what this Saturday, me and you will jump on, we'll do a quick battle against each other. And let's, if you win, then you get it. If not, then you don't. And and that's typically with like the items where like it's really broken and I
Mm-hmm.
could tell my player really wants it. And this person sometimes takes no poorly, so doing something like this shows him why I can't bring it into the game.
Okay, so you're visibly demonstrating to that
Yep.
player why you cannot allow this item. I can get on board with that. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that
Yeah.
idea. That's really good. Jumping back, I want to jump back to backstory real quick because I had a thought while we were discussing the item thing. Because we're talking here about players bringing things to their GM and um, about race, about class, and about backstory and things like that. But what I usually do for my players, I don't know if you do this, but whenever we're starting a new campaign, like Curse of Strahd I'm running right now, a D&D campaign, I wrote up a player's Bible on a Google Doc. And I
Yeah.
told them exactly what races were available, what classes
Hmm.
were available. I told them what method we were going to use to generate ability scores for the characters. I gave them a little bit of background about the campaign
Yeah.
and gave them all of that information. And I told them, what backgrounds in, because it's D&D 5th edition, what
Hmm.
backgrounds would work the best, for
Yeah.
that campaign. I had all that up in a document. So my point is, as a DM, if you want your player, if you don't want to have any issues with your players bringing you things, then make sure that you're setting expectations up front
Yeah.
and you're
100%.
you're giving them parameters to work within, because it's not fair to not give them any parameters. You're doing a homebrew and your player brings, like my example I brought up earlier, like a dark elf character, and you say, "Oh, there's no dark elves in my campaign." Well, why didn't you tell
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
So, but at the flip side of that is, as a player, because I've seen this online, abide by what your DM or your GM is saying. Because I have seen numerous posts on Reddit and on Facebook, in different groups I'm in, where a DM has said, "I've told my players no evil characters," and I had players show up with evil characters, and they let them play the evil characters, and then they came to regret it. So if your
Yeah.
if your GM gives you parameters, abide by those parameters.
If I give you parameters and you show up breaking them right off the bat, that's a massive red flag. We'll
Yep.
probably discuss it, but if you throw another red flag at me, I'm probably just booting you off my table.
Yep. I don't blame you. I don't blame you a bit. So, all right. So let's talk about character development and multi-classing.
Yeah, yeah. This is we vary differently on this, and it was an
Yeah.
interesting take when you told me the way you do it.
So here's my thing with multi-classing, and I may have a lot of GMs disagree with me on this, but when it comes to multi-classing in D&D 5th edition, I only let my players multi-class one time, unless they can come up with a really good narrative reason for why I should allow their character to multi-class into more than one classes. Because let's face it, with D&D, it's not that the system is not really designed to have a narrative reason for why players, like this character, all of a sudden is a barbarian and now all of a sudden can cast spells from a spell book. It's not
Yeah.
really inherently set up like that unless you do some kind of homebrew system. But yeah, generally one time unless they can come up with a really good narrative reason. So
Or the
you go
coffee
ahead.
lock. Yeah, you could have like a
Yeah,
coffee lock that's also a barid because why not? They all share the same attribute. Yeah,
yeah,
so I totally get what you're saying. One of my players, he watches all the TikTok D&D stuff, so he'll come in him and like, I found the most broken character build ever. At level 12, you take 5 points into this, and a 2 point level dip into this, and a 3 point level dip into this. It's like, all right, I get that. I get it.
mm-hmm.
But maybe you could not do that.
Yes.
So multi-classing, it's fun. I get it. As long as I think a lot of this would get away if you're starting at a lower level because you'll see the development. And if you're going to multi-class, I think telling me before you level up would be a great way to go about it.
Yes.
If
Mm-hmm.
if kind of like what you're saying, if you're a barbarian, all of a sudden you're like, I'm a wizard too. Uh, I'm gonna have some questions. Like,
Right.
did you even meet the requirement for that to begin with? But
No, exactly.
yeah, like,
Exactly.
but like it, like where'd your character develop these skills to even want to do so? So yeah, if you're
Right.
gonna multi-class, I think talking to the DM before you take a class would be a fantastic thing
Right.
because then in a couple sessions they could actually help give story narrative in that new developmental
Mm-hmm.
front that your character is going to have, and then you're almost broadcasting it to the party that there's going to be that you're changing to a new level or a new class as well, and so it feels better to
Yep.
me.
I agree. I agree. Now, I will say, however, there is one class in D&D 5th edition that makes narrative sense, and all of a sudden they would have these abilities in my mind. Well, two I can think of: sorcerer or warlock. Sorcerer, because you know what? I look at the sorcerers like think about the X-Men in Marvel Comics. Like these abilities just suddenly manifest themselves. That's generally the way the mutants work in the X-Men comics. I could see that with sorcerers. Like all of a sudden, this ability just manifested itself. Now, with a warlock, though, they have to make a pact with a patron. Okay, as we know, anybody who plays D&D. So there still needs to be some kind of narrative reason, but I mean that could happen overnight, like in a dream or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So
Speaking of which, I just forgot. I have to ask my DM on my Monday games if I can be a warlock because I have an 8 charisma. So again, make sure that you have requirements before you do things.
now tell me something, because I have seen this online and I've never figured out what this says. What the heck is a coffee lock? I feel
Coffee
stupid.
lock?
I feel stupid not knowing
It
what a coffee lock is.
so coffee logs don't ever have to sleep, and so they just like constantly can have their spells back.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
the
Right.
coffee log does start to break down because you can only benefit from a long rest once every 24 hours. So
Right.
it does in the PHP state that you can only recover once per 24. But
Right.
I feel like people, when they're doing crazy builds like that, just toss stuff out all the time.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. I feel dumb not knowing what the coffee lock was, but now I know what the coffee lock is. Okay.
The coffee
Cool.
lock.
All right.
Uh
So what is your perspective on multi-classing with players? Do you let them do more than one multi-class or more than one class?
yeah, I'm fine with it. Now if you come to me and like each level of your a new level, uh I may be a little questionable. You're like, I'm a level 1 fighter. I'm a level 1 rogue. I'm a level 1 paladin. I've been like, yeah, I mean, I see what you're doing. I don't think it's a great choice. But it's their player. If they're having fun with it and other people are having fun
Oh,
with
that's
it,
funny.
I'm gonna have fun with it. I honestly do try to have the most fun I can with allowing my players to have the most fun. Most of my table knows if I'm stepping in, it's because I think that it would ruin the fun for not just myself, but the
Right.
other people at the table as well. And I think having that kind of respect uh from a lot of my players, not all of my players, most of my
Hmm.
players do really have the respect where if I say no, they don't argue because they understand that I'm probably doing it for good reasons.
So, along with the idea of multi-class, I'm looking at Becca's comment here. Apparently, she had the world's worst druid, and it became a warlock because they encountered a Fey patron one time, and she decided you only live once. I love it. Now, see, that makes sense. That's a great story.
Hey, yeah,
I like
that
that one.
and see like and that's the thing is that's way more interesting if you do it in the middle of a game versus if you start the game at level 5. uh she hated being a
Being a
druid.
druid.
That's funny. uh so it's way more interesting like developing into that versus I'm starting level 5 and I'm multi-class 3 levels into druid, 2 into warlock, right?
Hmm.
You're obviously getting a lot of benefits from a split like that. You're still getting the invocations from warlock, uh but there's no story there, right? Like you would
Hmm.
have to have a backstory that explained this. And it doesn't feel as organic as if you did it in the middle of a game.
Okay, so now let me ask your thoughts on this, because I've seen posts online where someone's talking about building their character, and they had their idea for a character that, well, they had an idea when they first made the character, and it's not quite fitting their ideals, and they want to get an idea of how they can get this character to fit the vision that they had. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
seen posts where they go, oh, well, you could take one level in paladin and get this, or dip one level in fighter and get this, or dip one level in sorcerer and get this. So now that's obviously okay, it's kind of metagaming because there's really no
Yeah.
story reason behind it. You're looking at it from a purely mechanical perspective. Now,
Yeah.
you and I are very big on story and narrative, and that's one thing that you and I are kind of aligned on when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
running games. But obviously, there's games out there where the GM and the players are all about power gaming. Okay, so I feel like if that's the vibe at your table and it's all
Yeah.
about power gaming, have at it. Go for it.
Yeah.
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 So
100%.
yep.
Yeah, and I mean that's one thing that's going to go with almost any of our advice. Uh, Most of our advice is going to be talk to the table, talk to the DM. That's a lot of what this is about. Find out what does work and what doesn't work at your table,
Hmm.
and talk with the DM a lot. Keep an open discussion,
Hmm.
and you'll have a healthy game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as, like I said, if that's the vibe at your table, with any of our advice, I mean, nobody has to listen to our advice. We're just going off our experience. But you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's the vibe at your table, and it doesn't jive with our advice, it's no big deal. This is just how you and I run our games. Now you had an interesting way that you approach downtime activities, and I've never done this, but I have seen it done. I've seen stories online and seen other GMs who do this, but
yep,
this happened to you recently. You were telling me about
yeah.
this right before we started. So go ahead.
Yeah, so speaking about downtime and stuff like that,
Hmm.
one thing that I like to try to do as much as I can with my downtime is try to text, chat, and do stuff like that with the players outside of our scheduled time, because that's going to give us more time to do stuff together. So if
Hmm.
I can save an hour of, hey guys, you guys have a week of downtime, but we're going to go ahead and skip ahead and do stuff, and we can discuss what you guys did during your week of downtime after the session during the week. And what I recently did is I knew that there was going to be a fairly big conversation between one of my player characters and one of the PCs. And it was about to happen. It was going to happen really early at the beginning of the next session. So
Hmm.
what I did is before the session started, I messaged the PC, and I was like, "Hey, can we get together and do this? That way we're not taking in our scheduled group time." And so it was about a 30, almost 45 minutes worth of discussion between these two, the PC and the NPC. And
Hmm.
when we were in the middle of the game, it was they got to the location, the group spoke with the lady for a second, and then the NPC was like, "Me and you need to talk," and they went off and talk by themselves. But in game, it was they go off, and about 30 minutes later, they come back. So what took 45 minutes on Saturday took a minute on Thursday.
Yep, I like it.
And yeah, and so it let the group do more. And yeah, I love to try to do my downtime stuff outside of our group time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I like it. Now, talking about skills and acquisitions and things like that. What's your approach with players upskilling, developing their characters, and acquisitions? I think with that we were talking about like if they want to, I don't know,
Buy real estate.
buy
Yeah.
real estate, buy a tavern, buy an inn.
Yeah.
How do you usually approach that? Do you do that in game, or is that something you do outside
It
the game?
I'm gonna try to push for that outside of time, or
Hmm.
outside of game time, just because, again, as much as I can keep. So if player A wants to go buy a house for player A, I'm going to try to do that outside of game. Now, if the group, player A through D, is like, "Hey guys, let's go buy a group house," that's going to be interesting because it's going to be the whole group now, and they can
Okay.
role play with each other as they're looking at property, or some kind of like fortified building and stuff like that. So that becomes a narrative story point for the whole group versus, "Hey, Joe went and bought a house. Let's go listen to Joe buy a house for 10 minutes."
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I'm gonna check something here, a message here real quick. Um, Hang on
All by
one.
time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I just
yes.
have somebody who was trying to join the stream and they're saying it's not showing up. So yeah, let me just let them
Was
know.
it the fake channel?
No, I sent them the link.
No.
Um, so well, hopefully they can hop on. So just want to let them know we are live. So okay, here's one of my favorite topics, Jeremy.
Hit me.
Getting next into this with um, issues between players outside the game.
Yeah.
Okay, I have had players bring um, they have had issues with somebody else, like not in the game, it's outside the game. They have a
Yep.
personal issue with somebody, another player playing
Yeah.
in a game.
Yeah.
The way I've always handled that, so I don't get perceived. as playing favorites.
Yeah.
Now, this, based on our conversation, but what we got online here, this assumes that you're playing with adults because sometimes you play with kids. But if you're playing with adults, my what I tell them is you guys need to work it out. I'm not stepping in and playing mediator here because I don't want to be accused of playing favorites and choosing a side. So you guys need to talk about it. You need to work it out. If you can't work it out like adults, and this is always going to be a conflict, then you guys decide who's leaving the game and who's staying in the game. And if you
Yeah.
guys cannot work that out, then guess what? Neither one of you are going to play in a game any further. And again, this is how I avoid being accused of playing favorites.
Have you had any relationship breakups happen in the game and both were playing the game?
Thankfully, no, but I did have a
Oh,
couple who were boyfriend and
oh,
girlfriend, and I was just on pins and needles hoping it didn't happen.
oh man, it's happened to me twice now. It's happened to me twice. Yeah, no, that's awkward. And yeah, somebody's got to go.
Yep.
Uh,
How
but
did you
they typically
how
oh
did you handle it?
they figured out which one was gonna stay and play.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's how that happened. So
yeah.
same thing. They just let that kind of stuff deal with it. Now, if they're having problems and they start to bring that drama to the table,
hmm
then I'm going to address it. Uh, I'm
Yes.
prompt that at the beginning, I'm going to say, you guys need to deal with this before next week, figure it out. Now, if we come to play and the drama is really bad, I'm probably going to pause game. I may cancel the rest of the session and say,
hmm
you're both done. Session's over for tonight. I'll speak to the rest of you later.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So, yes, if like a hypothetical, which it sounds like what you're talking about here, is that if they talked about it and said, "Hey, we're cool. We talked about it. It's not going to be a problem with the game." And they come next session and there's very clear drama and conflict. I'm 100% with you. I'd be like, okay, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? We're not dealing with this because now you're affecting me and you're affecting the other players and the remainder of the table. So I'm with you. I would stop the session and I would tell them, okay, I would tell the group this session's done for right now, and you two need to go work this out and then talk to the rest of the players, like you said, another time.
Now, as great as all this is, I've also been DMing for my children and some of their friends, and none of this advice applies to that. Once you're playing with, I would say, teenagers and young children,
Yep.
typically don't let them work it out. You should probably, as an adult, help mediate what is being what let them talk about it, but make sure you're there to
Yes.
make sure that it is a safe discussion and not just bickering and yelling at each other. 100%. My daughter, there was a merchant that was selling a magical item, and she's like, to my son, "Give me your gold so I can buy this. It's going to be amazing." And he's like, "No, no." Uh, and then ensuing mayhem between brother and sister. So
Yep.
obviously, as a DM, the second you're playing with children and teenagers, uh, the rules do
Yes.
change, and you're much more of a mediator in these kind of scenarios. Try to let them discuss it and work it out amongst themselves and give advice and feedback. But yeah, make sure that you are there for those scenarios.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, hey, I'm gonna hang on one second here, Jeremy. I want to see if I can try to get these. I got several people here are trying to find our stream, so
We just had an influx in people.
I okay. So I want to see if I can get the link over to them, and for some reason I'm having a hard. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. Let me send the link. You know why? Because I think I just sent them to our channel on YouTube, and that's why.
That would make sense.
That would make sense. All right. So I hate to interrupt the stream, but they're wanting to join, so I want to see if we can get them on here.
Want to get
Uh,
people in. We appreciate you guys all
absolutely.
stopping in. Hopefully you guys are
Absolutely.
getting some something good out of this. Some
Okay.
of you, this is probably old news, but other people hopefully can find a little bit of tidbit that's helpful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What about player versus player?
Player versus player. For one, when in episode 1 of our stream, we actually went over like veils and lines. this is one of my lines. I do not allow PvP unless it is
Mhm.
like you guys are in an arena and you fight each other. Completely different. If we're in the middle of the game and you decide to attack another player, uh, I'm going to pause the game. We're probably going to discuss it, and I may boot you out of my game. I do not allow player versus player in my games.
And I'm going to assume that you said at the beginning of each campaign, you set that expectation up front.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and that one is, once again, that's one of those things that needs to go into a player's Bible, and that's one thing I heavily recommend for GMs to do when you're starting a new game or a new campaign. It's
Yeah.
so easy to set up a player's Bible and send that out to your players, and it's one of the things that needs to be in there. Um,
On top.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just laughing at Cheryl. I'm glad that you clarified that teens and kids need mediation. All right. Well, you know what? Just call us Captain Obvious. So
Hey, I mean, I play with kids. It was very obvious that I could not let the 5-year-old argue
yeah.
by himself.
Give me your gold. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Uh
I apologize.
oh no, you're fine. Uh yeah, so PvP and kind of talking about what you're saying is having that DM's like basically handbook of like, hey guys, this is a lot of the stuff for my game. It's so easy to have that on a Google Doc or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're playing, if something happens and you make a ruling, go put it on the doc. And now the next time you start a game and you have new players, you're like, hey, here's the Google
Absolutely.
Doc, and it's even up to date. So
Absolutely.
try to
Yep.
keep it's just fantastic to always have a reference for new people and even for yourself sometimes to be able to jump over to that and see how you have ruled stuff.
And not only that, but here's a quick tip in case, because a lot of people don't think about this. If you do use a Google Doc and you're updating it with rulings that are made in the game, make sure you put a date on there as the last time it was updated. So both you and your players looking at it can know how recent it is. A lot of people don't think about putting an updated, the
Yeah.
last updated date on there. So, all right. I'm looking at our notes here. GM rulings, because I think both you and I have had players who have argued with us over
Oh yeah.
rulings that we have made in a game, and nothing drives me crazier than a
It's session
player.
ruining. Yeah,
Oh,
it's session
absolutely,
ruining. Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, and the players who do this, I love this too, is they not only do they argue with you against your ruling, but then they try to rally the players against you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, guys, doesn't this make sense? What I'm saying, doesn't my argument make sense? It's like, don't be trying to rally the other players against me.
And don't quote Jeremy Crawford to me. I don't care.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, because what did I say to you when we were prepping for the
Yeah.
session? Don't quote
Yeah.
Jeremy Crawford to me. Jeremy Crawford's not running this game.
Yeah.
I'm running this game.
I hate that. But he's the writer of fifth edition. I don't care. I
Don't
don't
care.
care.
I don't care.
Uh but so your ruling is the same as mine, right? It state your case, make it real quick. I'll try
Yep.
to figure out, oh, you're right. I did rule that badly. Let's flip it real quick. If it's going to go into a debate, I'm going to say no, message me and we can discuss it during the week,
Yes.
right? Uh I'm not going to debate you on a rule in the middle of a game. If and it took me a while to learn this lesson. It really did. It really did. I lost a friend from playing my game because I wasn't standing my ground on this. If you're gonna debate me, I'm just gonna start canceling sessions and you're gonna be booted.
Yep.
It ruined the game. I had one individual that ruined the game multiple times from doing this, and it just ruined the fun for everybody.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. It's state your case one time. If you can make a good case one time, I'm open minded. You know what? I can admit when I make a mistake.
Yeah,
Just state your case one time, and just like you said, it's like, okay, you know what? I agree. You know what? You pointed out some things I didn't consider, didn't think about. Let's retcon this. I'm perfectly okay with doing it. But if you state your case and I still don't change my mind, do not
it's over. It's
debate me.
over. Yeah,
Right.
it
Do
is
not debate me
over.
because
We can have that debate on if we're playing on Thursday, we can have that debate on Sunday. Don't ruin my weekend, so don't do it on Friday. But we can have
yeah,
that debate on a Sunday. We can have that debate on Monday.
Yeah,
I'm not going to ruin a session debating rules with you.
yeah, absolutely, and mechanics, and yeah,
Mm-mm.
I agree. Um, now, like I also have here in the notes that if you can quickly, point to the relevant part in a rule book and
Yep.
show me where my ruling is incorrect, that's fine. With the caveat that I'm still the one running the game, that I may disagree with that, what the player's handbook says, because it's all situational, right? You have to look at it in context in the situation that's happening in the game. So that part of the player's handbook might apply in a later situation, but I'm making my ruling based on the context of the situation that we're currently in.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, Jeremy, this last one here that we're going to talk about, you've got more experience at this than I do because I would love to do a homebrew where I'm jiving with all the players and they're bringing ideas to me and we're building this world together. But
Hmm.
as we all know, we're all individuals, everybody's got different ideas.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet, but it sounds like it's happened for you. So, what has been your experience with players helping you with building your homebrews?
Yeah, so one of the things that one of my players in particular loves to write lore, right? Whole write entire kingdoms, whole write up like, hey, these are the heroes of this area. Here's an event that they celebrate in this area. Just all kinds of stuff. He really, really enjoys coming up with lore, battles,
Mm-hmm.
significant events, and stuff like that. And he'll help build NPCs and stuff for me as well. Uh, Actually, in a game that Paul's going to be a guest star in at some point in time in
At
my
some
game.
point.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, I actually had this specific player. I said, "Hey, I need you to make this kind of class for me. Can you go ahead and do it?" And has made a class had made your character so I didn't have to do it. He made your character and gave him a little bit of a backstory. So it's stuff like that. Having a player that can help me do that frees up so much of my time to go do other stuff for the game. And it's absolutely amazing. I've had other players jump in just because of what he did. Some of the other ones have wanted to do that. And I always try to find a space for them to play with in my game. Uh, Now, obviously, I'm going to read over everything that they write
Sure, sure.
and tweak it and stuff like that. But and this person in specifically has a lot of history school. Like he's gone to school for a lot of history stuff, right?
Oh, okay,
So
good.
he's really good at understanding how events can shape a world, and he uses that to help shape my world. Uh, in a way that just makes it that much better. So it's super fun, and I'm super happy that I have a player that is so interested in helping me build my worlds.
And along those lines, I'm going to relate this because I've never had that experience with players, at least not yet. But before we started the stream, I let you know that I recently got Skyrim on my Switch.
Yeah,
And anybody who's played Skyrim, you come across all these books that
yeah,
has all this lore in it. Now I know this is like Skyrim is Elder Scrolls, I think number 5. So there's been previous games. And
yeah.
have you played any of the previous Elder Scrolls game? Have you
Oh
played
yeah.
all of them? Okay.
No, I
Okay.
haven't. I did not play 1 and 2, but I played Morrowind and Oblivion a lot.
Okay. So I guess my question is, are they? And I'm going to relate this to what you just brought up here. So bear with me. But
Yeah,
do you know in Skyrim, are they pulling that lore from events from previous
some of it.
titles?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So even some of your missions that you're playing in
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim call back to previous games. Yeah,
Okay. So I mean, I'm looking at these books, and I'm like, these are like some of them are poems, some of them are songs, some of them are like fictional tales, some of them are actually history. I mean, most of them are history.
hmm,
But I would just love to be have a campaign like a homebrew where I have the basic framework and I've got the overall idea, of the major events, and then somebody can, players can come in and actually add
build it
on to
out.
those. It would
Yeah,
be so awesome. I mean, I'm so jealous hearing you talk about, um,
a
you know,
player building it up.
building like,
Yeah.
wars, and all these things. So, what would be your advice, Jeremy, for players to take ideas for world building to their GM?
So, I mean, you're gonna have to discuss it a lot. Like me and this specific person talk a lot during the week about the current game, about past games, about oh man, this would be a really cool event that led about to this specific.
Hmm.
So, like, if something's happening in the game, me and him may be talking and been like, "What if this is what happened previously, which is what caused this?" Yeah, let's write that down. Now it's canon. So stuff like that really adds into it. But we kind of talked a little bit about this previously, is a lot of my worlds also build on top of each other. So
Hmm.
one campaign leads into the next campaign, which then leads into the next one. So something else that happens is one campaign becomes the lore for another campaign. Events, uh, kind of like what you're
Hmm.
talking about. The events from Morrowind can be in the books for Skyrim because they happened previously in the game. So I do also do that, but I mean, just having him write lore
Hmm.
and the first game, and I still have that lore when we go into our fifth campaign.
Wow, that's just so. It sounds like you're in the same game world. Are your
I
campaigns just in different parts of the same world?
So most of the time, yeah, I started Pathfinder, so I started to
Mhm.
create a new world. I'm on my like fourth world. My first world was the one that I played for like 15 years.
Mhm.
And then we kind of stopped playing that one. And then I had one world where like they killed a bunch of gods and it kind of ruined the world. So uh, played a
Okay.
new one.
Okay.
But yeah.
So if I'm a player in your campaign
Hmm.
and you have a basic framework in one area, it's not really fleshed out, and I can come to you and I'm like, "Hey, Jeremy, I got like this great idea because you kind of talked about say this war that happened over here, but I
Hmm.
have this idea on fleshing this out and adding more details to it." So what I'm thinking is, if I'm a GM, if I'm you,
Hmm.
then I would want to number one, you want to read over it, right? You want to trust but
Yeah.
verify. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking that the best thing for players to do is really understand what your GM has already established and don't purposely try
Yeah.
to change any of that. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's okay to state your case once. It's like, can we just change this one little thing here that
Yeah.
hasn't been introduced in the campaign to make this fit? I mean, I'd be okay with that.
One of my favorite things is when my player does that. So my player will write up like, "Here's the battle," and Holden like, "Here's the general of this army that
Hmm.
won," and I'm like, "Oh, let me go over to my world map, and this town's name is now," and like all of a sudden you have the general's name that you can use as landmark names, right?
Gotcha.
Because a lot of landmarks are typically names or battles and stuff like that.
Yep.
So letting players come up with some of that stuff, you can then pull from it. And there's having a player who wrote a little bit of lore go into an area and all of a sudden come across the city of the name of the hero from a battle that he wrote the battle's information, right? His
Yeah.
character has nothing to do with it, but all of a sudden that joy from like, I'm the one who came up with that name. I know who this is. It's a
Right.
really fun moment.
Yeah, and some people may say that's metagaming, but I think that's being a little strict
Yeah.
about it. I mean, yes, they knew about it outside the game; they came up with it. But listen, from a game perspective, you're pulling your player more into the campaign and engaging
Yeah.
them more with the campaign by allowing
It,
them
it
to world
if
build.
metagaming is letting everybody have more fun and letting moments like that happen, that is the
Right.
correct kind of metagaming to let happen.
Right. Yeah, I would say. I mean, it doesn't seem like metagaming to me, but I could just see that somebody
Yeah.
would say
Oh
that's
yeah. Yeah.
metagaming if they're going to be really strict about it. So, all right. Well, I think we've covered this.
Well,
Did anything that we missed that you can see from your end, Jeremy?
I think we hit most of our talking points.
Awesome. Okay. Well, what are we talking about next time? I think you've got the notes on that.
I do. So yeah, next week we're going to be talking about how to introduce new players or new people to your table specifically. Uh we'd love to hear comments from you about this topic that we were talking about
Hmm.
this week. You can hit us up on Twitter, leave a comment, and feel free during any of our streams to chat with us, and we'll try to bring it up during the stream.
Yep.
Becca and Cheryl were in here tonight talking a lot with us, and we really do enjoy it. Also, I have a Kickstarter. It's going to be my first one with one of my partners starting next month. So I'll be sure to bring that up next time too. So you guys can have a shot at jumping in on that Kickstarter. It's basically a small book that will have all kinds of stuff and goodies in it.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome. If you can give me that information, Jeremy, then when I put this on YouTube, I can put
yeah,
that down in the show notes for on the YouTube channel.
yep, we'll definitely have that on the YouTube. It goes live on the second, which will be a couple days after our next stream, but we'll have it
Yep.
on the YouTube for any of you guys who are interested in it.
Yep.
Uh, please subscribe over at our YouTube
Yep.
or follow us over here on Twitch. That'll make sure that you know whenever we have new videos and stuff like that.
Yep. That'd be great. So, want to thank you all for watching. Jeremy, it's great to get to talk to you again.
Fan.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I was
Yep.
gonna say that Easter threw a little bit of a wrench in our streaming stuff, but we got together again, and
Yep.
it'll be a little bit more regular here as there's no holidays, I think, for a little bit. But that's it for tonight.
You know
Thanks for
what?
watching.
You know what
Oh, go
holiday
ahead.
is coming? Wait a minute. You know what holiday is coming up? We better check this. We don't have to
Oh
check it here on
gosh,
the
what
stream.
is it?
Mother's Day. Listen,
Oh,
Mother's
yeah.
Day is on a Sunday. We better check that one. So, all right. But I think we're good with
Yeah.
for Mother's Day. So anyway, everybody, thanks for watching. Really appreciate this, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Jeremy, we'll talk to you later.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye bye.